Hello, everyone. Um, Hope you're all doing well. I am excited to be talking about today's topic, which is pressure and expectations. I'm going to talk about it in the context of a Spartan race, which is an obstacle race that I did, um, 3 days ago. 3 days ago at the time of recording this. And I want to clarify a few things. First, this the focus of this is on the pressure and expectations you have of yourself. I'm not going to talk so much about expectations of others. That could be a topic for another day. We focus just on the expectations that we have for ourselves. And after I share some of my thoughts and my experience from running this Spartan race, obstacle race most recently, you really just come away with some ways that you can pursue your goals or the life that you want to live in a way that lasts, in a way that's sustainable, in a way that's actually enjoyable. Because I think a lot of the time we create goals and we have expectations of ourselves or of our life, and often we view those as good to motivate us, to drive us to achieve greater things or to get out of pain or suffering. But with those expectations for ourselves and for our lives, we often just create a lot of pressure, a lot of misery, a lot of misery that comes with that when we have goals and desires and expectations that we're so attached to, and we get so attached to them, and we believe that they will bring so much goodness or so much relief, or will become so much more worthy once we have those things. And all of that leads to a dissatisfaction with the present, insufficiency with where we are now or who we are now, or how much we weigh right now, or what state of condition we're in physically, or related to a diagnosis or disease. And there's this interesting balance between goal achievement and acceptance with the present. And I think that as soon as we get fixed on a goal or an expectation of ourselves and get attached to a certain outcome so much that we start resisting the present. We start resisting who we are or our current circumstance or any of those things. As soon as we start doing that, we completely defeat the purpose of goals and expectations. And the purpose of goals and expectations really are to move us to something new, to something different. And through that process of becoming something new or achieving something new or something different, we become something new. Our character evolves. Who we are evolves. And that is ultimately what we want. That's ultimately the best gift. Because as soon as we evolve as a person, then the goals we achieve will become sustainable. They won't be something that we just create in the temporary or in the present. There's something that we can recreate and take to the next level over and over, because of who we are because we've become someone new, someone different. Okay, so here's some fascinating things I experienced as I prepared for this most recent Spartan race. And just a little bit of context on my Spartan races. I started racing, doing these obstacle courses about 4 years ago. And before that time, I never would have dreamed of doing one because of my chronic pain, my rheumatoid arthritis, and I just was in a mental state and physical state where I was just like, I could never do something like that. I could never do something so rigorous, something that's so physically demanding. And this is a whole different story that I'm not gonna go into all the details. Part of the process I followed, I included in what I call a Get Unstuck formula. If you'd like that, there's a link in this. There's a link available in the notes for more content. I'll reshare the Get Unstuck formula that shares really the ingredients that I followed to get myself to a place where I actually felt comfortable running an obstacle race after for so many years it was something of just imagination. Not even imagination. I couldn't even imagine. I couldn't even consider that I would do something like that, given my chronic pain and rheumatoid arthritis. Anyway, so I started racing, doing these 4 years ago, and I have noticed a trend every time I am preparing and getting closer to the race. And that trend is a series of events and really emotional discomfort rooted in discouragement. And this has revealed a whole lot about my pattern of thinking. As I developed awareness around my thinking and started pursuing these obstacle races, I'm like, I have a tendency to experience discouragement, and I do that quite often. And so in one of the first races I did, the discouragement was around, it was, oh man, I'm forgetting the first one. The one before this one. So last year I was dealing with calf injury, and shoulder injury. And I remember leading up to the races being so discouraged about that. I'm like, man, I've been preparing for over a year and training, and now just a few weeks before the race, I have this injury. And of course I was discouraged and like had all these concerns about whether I could race. Okay, I'm remembering the first time I raced, it was all around. It's really just my capability, my doubt around can I even do this, and my pain. And so I was often discouraged enough to be like, I don't think what if, I remember having some days of fatigue and chronic pain about a week before the race. I'm like, man, if I continue to have this pain, I can't do this. I won't be able to do this race. And so those were some of the discouragements that I experienced in the past. What I've experienced just recently, a few days ago at the race, was sickness. The week before the race, I was sick. It was just a cold bug of some sort. I had sore throat, some headaches, and some body aches. And I was like, again, in discouragement, like, man, I don't know if I'll be able to do this race. Of course I'm sick. Like, why did I get sick the week before the race? And so here's what some really simple things I've learned, and what tools I've used every time I've prepared for these races and have had this discouragement. And the first tool is getting clear on the story, like what the discouragement is coming from. And so every time I experience some discouragement, I'm like looking at, what is this about? Like, of course I know what it's about. I know it's about this injury. I know it's about like my pain, my fatigue. I know most recently it's about this sickness. but what is the underlying expectation, right? Why is why are these things a problem? Well, it in my case, it was because I had this expectation of how I would perform. I had this vision of how well I would do on this race, and that showed up in forms of like how I do relative to other people in my age group in terms of ranking and my speed, how many of the obstacles I'd be able to complete or fail. I had all these expectations of myself, and they were high expectations. I was like, "Oh, that's that's fascinating to see." Um, and then the the key around this is to understand the expectations and then to question them. Really, just question: is this useful? Is this really that important to me? So that ties into the next tool, which is goal clarity. Goal clarity. I'm like, all right, um, what really is the goal of running this race? And if the goal is to be the best, okay, that's a reasonable expectation. And I now understand why I have all this pressure and am experiencing discouragement. And um, the crazy part is that that expectation of like being the best of the race and competing at a high level against other people in my age group, that was one that just snuck in unintentionally. That was not really my goal. But this is something you can always watch out for. Um, it's so easy to lose sight of what really matters, of what's really important to us. Our brain can sneak in all these other goals and expectations, and we're not even fully aware. They just kind of sneak in there, and they are running on autopilot. And what are they doing? They're creating these high expectations that result in this pressure and then discouragement or other negative emotions leading up to the thing or in our pursuit of the thing. And so I was able to remind myself of what my goal really is. My goal really is not to rank, get a certain ranking for this race or to place in a certain spot relative to others. My goal was longevity, health, and to actually have fun. Health and fun was my goal. So I'm like, oh, that's fascinating. Health, physical health, and fun is my goal. And yet, here I am leading up to the race, filled with all these expectations to perform at a high level and to place competitively against my peers. Oh, and once I got that clarity, I saw what the story was. I anchored back to really what my goal is. Then I was able to reduce that expectation. I was able to kind of like debunk it, right? I'm like, whoa, that's just a made up expectation that kind of snuck in here that's not really what I want. It's not really what I want. What I really want is good health long term and strength and physical fitness. And so I have a training plan that I follow to achieve that goal. And running an obstacle race is tangential to that. It's like, it's just for fun. It's like, hey, since I'm training in this way and developing physical strength and health and cardiovascular endurance and capacity and all these things, I'm like, I could actually do one of these races. And would I like to? Yes. Like, that sounds really fun. I actually really love the idea of taking on that challenge. And so that's what this was all about. Understanding what the goal was. The goal and so when I was able to understand the goal and remind myself of it, that this is about physical health and this is about fun, then it was very easy for me to bring down that expectation and reduce the pressure when I was experiencing all that talk from my brain being like, hey, you can't be sick. You can't be sick the week leading up to the race. Gosh, how did you let that happen? Then I just want to beat up on myself. Like, why did I not be more careful over the past week or two related to sickness? Why didn't I, um, practice some social distancing or something to make sure I don't get sick? And like all of that was nonsense. And I'm like, oh, that's just my brain reacting to some of this pressure that's coming from an expectation that I actually don't really care about. I don't have this expectation to perform at a high level. I'm like, no, that's not the goal. The goal is to have some fun and to do something I can actually do because of the physical training I've been doing, and because of my long-term goal of health. And my experience has been, regardless of the circumstance. So over these 3 examples, these 3 years of running this same race, the first year I told you is about my pain and like, can I really do this? Second year is about discussions around injury. This year is about sickness. Like what I'm learning is every time I come to like near or I'm pursuing a goal or an event, like this kind of drama is going to show up. This kind of pressure is going to show up. This negative emotion is going to show up. And so now I just expect it. Speaking of expectations, right now I'm just expecting that my brain is going to sneak in these nonsensical expectations and mount this pressure. And as a result, I'm going to experience some negative emotion and it'll show up in different ways. Anyway, I just plan on that. I'm like, that's going to be the case anytime I'm pursuing a goal. So check in with yourself on things that you're pursuing and what you tend to experience leading up to it. And can you identify a pattern of negative emotion or pressure that you can now just simply expect and not be so disturbed or flustered or concerned when it shows up? That high expectation or that pressure or that negative emotion might show up, and now it's like, oh yeah, of course this is going to show up. This is what my brain likes to do. This is a pattern that is really efficient, that's really practiced. So it's going to show up. And once this awareness is achieved, then it becomes much easier to manage it and work through it. And so the way I handled this a few days ago, and this happened the week leading up to the race, even until the minute the race started. Like I'm standing in line to register and get my racing gear and whatever, and my brain is going off on this. It's like, you can't do this race. You've been sick all week. And I'm just standing there in line watching this chatter and this nonsense take place. And I just didn't make it a problem. I'm like, yeah, of course, this is what my brain does. And it became very easy for me to practice this final tool that I want to share, which is to make peace with worst case scenario. Make peace with it. And I honestly made peace with I'm like, yeah, worst case scenario, I don't run the race and I experience some disappointment. So what? So what? That's okay. And this became easier to do when I was clear about my goal. In this case, my goal is long-term. It's about physical health and longevity. And so it was so easy for me to make peace because I'm like, it's not really about this race. I don't need to do this race. I'm doing this race for fun. And so I was able to make peace with worst case scenario. But my brain wanted to sneak in this other expectation of no, you got to perform at a high level. You got to beat your previous time. And I just was like, I just watched that chatter. And I'm like, no, I don't. I don't have to beat it. It's okay if I don't beat it. And what's so important in this practice is that you actually believe how you're responding. When you're responding with this kind of reassurance, it can't be just a mantra that you're just saying without believing. It might start with little belief, but you've got to work on believing it. Say to yourself, I don't need to do this, or whatever that pressure is. You're like, so what? So what if I can't do the race? Or so what if I have to go really slow because I've been sick and my lungs aren't in a great state and I haven't been exercising much this week because of my sickness? I'm like, so what? And then I use that narrative, I state it to myself, and then it's kind of a pulse check. I'm like, how much do I believe that? What feeling did that create in me? Did that actually relieve some of the pressure? If it didn't relieve the pressure, then I know I'm not fully believing it. So then I get to work believing what I want to believe. And in this case, I wanted to believe that I can totally skip out on this race and it's okay. And then the story comes up like, oh, but do you know how much you paid to run this race? What a waste of money. And I'm like, so I just work on all those little things that show up and I'm like, oh yeah, the money. So what? Whether I run the race or not, the money's already spent. So I have that dialogue with myself and I just create peace. And I get to a place where I fully believe that it's perfectly fine if I were to decide not to do the race because I'm sick. Or that I run the race slowly because of the sickness and I get my slowest time. I'm like, fine. That's totally fine. And I get to a place where I truly believe it. And how will you know that you truly believe it? How will you know that you are reducing the expectations or relieving the pressure? In your body. That's how you'll know. In your body. When you start to experience less pressure, emotional pressure, when you experience less tightness, then you know you have practiced these tools, you have used them effectively, and also remind yourself, remember, sometimes this process can take some time. When I say time, I don't know, it can vary for everyone. It could take 10 minutes, it could take an hour, it could take days. And if you're not experiencing relief of pressure right away or tightness, then just allow it. Sometimes if I'm like working on it and I'm working to believe that it's okay if I don't run this race and the tightness is still there, I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not fully believing that. And I guess that's just what is going to be the case right now. Like I'm just going to continue to have some tightness and some pressure. And then I make peace with that. And I'm like, that's okay. I can have some pressure. I can have some tightness. I know it's all coming from a story that I don't really want to believe. And I'm going to run the race anyway. And then I also reassuring myself, I'm not going to be stupid. I'm not going to run the race and do something dumb that like isn't good for my health. If I'm not feeling well, I'm going to stop. I can trust myself. And that reassurance is like, and I'm experiencing some tightness, some pressure, some ideas I need to perform at a higher level. And I'm like, I'm just going to let all that be there. And I'm going to run the race still in the way that I want to run it. And that might mean slow. And that might mean I don't finish. The emotion and the pressure might still be there. And maybe I haven't fully resolved this. And that's okay. I can run the race anyway. So take those tools, see how you can start applying them. Share any comments or thoughts about really what you think about some of these tools, which is, if I summarize them, right? One is understand the story, maybe the false expectation that is showing up. Two, anchor back to the goal clarity. What really matters to me? What do I really care about? And get clear on what that is. And then three is to reduce or debunk the pressure of the expectation, right? Reduce the pressure, debunk the false expectation. Once you have done that, then you will start to relieve that pressure. You'll start to experience a different emotional, you'll experience yourself differently emotionally and physically. And finally, if you don't experience that change right away, you reassure yourself this is okay. I can just experience this tightness, this pressure, this emotion. I know it's coming from this false story. I'm going to proceed anyway and go forward in the way that I want to. So there you have it. Thank you so much for joining. I wish you all the very best, and let me know how things go and any other tools or tips that you might have or your own experience. And with that, until next time, bye everyone.